Decentralize all the things. Decentralize all the things.
Hey there! Welcome to the Web3 Summit Decentralize Now podcast series, hosted by the Decentralize All The Things podcast network. This series features discussions about decentralization from the 2018 Web3 Summit held in Berlin, Germany. This is episode 12. In this episode, we dive into a fishbowl conversation about radical decentralization and the importance of building systems that are fully decentralized from the ground up. Thanks for tuning in. We hope you enjoy the show.
So our next talk is going to be the same format. It's an awesome, fun panel. And Luis is going to be seeding the idea, the topic. It's about radical decentralization, what we're doing wrong. So I know many of you probably know Luis. He is the CEO of Aragon One, and I'm working really closely with him to DAOify the world. We're pretty stoked about it. So hopefully, does anyone else want to talk about decentralization? And they can join us to start this panel. It's the same concept as before, where we have 5 chairs up here and 4 people in them, and anyone can just hop in and join the discussion. So yeah, who wants to come on up? Luis, do you want to give us like a 5-10 minute intro about what you want to talk about?
Yeah, cool. So what I want to talk about today is radical decentralization, and this means not compromising decentralization. So basically making sure that all systems we engineer, they are fully decentralized from day one. We don't even have like a caching server. We don't even have, like web pages hosted somewhere that are like on a centralized server. We decentralize all that from the DNS to our like code repo to like our governance on how updates are pushed to our smart contracts. All of that to make sure we don't compromise, and we build systems that are actually new and not just like a replication of the establishment in a new form.
So are you thinking about we have giant telcos that we interact with the internet with to access these decentralized protocols. And we have, everyone's using AWS and DigitalOcean. Like, what are your thoughts on that piece of the infrastructure?
Well, I think if you create a fully decentralized app, that doesn't even matter because you can run some nodes on DigitalOcean, but people should be able to just run like their own light node, an IPFS node locally in their computer. And that's something that we've been working on, creating some sketches of an Electron app that wraps Aragon. And then you basically have an IPFS node. And when you start it, you run the IPFS node locally. And, it just fetches the content that you need. So it's not like very intensive for your machine. So doing stuff like that, like smallest pieces here and there, like a light client, an IPFS client, we can really have like nodes that are just nodes and don't depend of like Infura or any other like centralized server.
I mean, that's really cool. So are you focused personally, obviously, just on Aragon, right? What kind of I know you have Aragon Package Manager, for instance, and I definitely use it in some of my projects for DApp node. But what's the approach to getting other people to start taking the radical decentralization approach to jump in?
I think it's just offering software that makes it easy. So, for example, when we created the Aragon Package Manager, we saw that there was a need for smart contract upgradability and also upgradability for front-end apps, because you gotta upgrade, you gotta make your products better, you gotta do security fixes. But at the same time, the status quo like a year ago was that you deploy upgradability and then you said only owner can upgrade the contract. And it's basically like a decentralized protocol, but there's an address that can completely change the code in the contract. So it isn't really decentralized. It's just the surface seems decentralized, but it isn't, which is very misleading. I would say that's even worse than having a purely centralized system, because it's centralized. But this other one, you're like, what is that? So by creating this package manager, we make it very easy for people to build governance on the upgrades. So you can have a community veto, or you can have like a small community multi-sig, or a DAO that has whatever governance process to actually approve a package upgrade. And so it's very easy. Like you can set these things up with a beautiful UI. And if you're a programmer, there are 5 CLI commands you can run on your terminal to interact with this package manager. So it is really, really easy. I would say it's even easier than the alternative. And that's how we should fight things. We should make things easier to incentivize people to use them.
The technology seems like sort of only a piece of the puzzle, like the people problem. Is there something other than simple, like making it simple to kind of overcome the person adopting kind of this radical decentralized model?
I can say that we're really young in a lot of this stuff, and it's just that it needs to be not only simple, but it needs to be easier and better at providing the solution. And we're definitely not there yet, I would say, in general, but we're working on it. It's young. So I don't think people will use anything unless it actually, like, no one cares about the underlying value, unfortunately. Like, very few people. Oh, that's like the niche, right? The couple of people that are really idealistic and want to see a change in the world, and they live that change themselves. Oh man, I wish that was everyone. It's not, and especially not in every topic. So, if APM, Argon Package Manager, doesn't work as well as NPM, it's going to be pretty hard.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there are ways that it can work better. Like, technically, we have a lot of advantages. So, like, for example, when NPM is down, their servers are down, like, there's literally no programmer in the world that can do anything. Just like programming stops for a few hours. With Aragon PM, that doesn't even happen. So I think stuff like that, we can really use the edge we have for being decentralized, not only as a kind of a ideological value, but also like practical value.
Yeah, I mean, GitHub was down the other day. It literally stopped development for DAppNode for a little bit, right? And if there was Pando and they could just like make it happen, if there was a decentralized GitHub, and especially since Microsoft owns it now, I mean, we need these tools. But thanks for jumping in, man. What you got?
Yeah. So I also think building fully decentralized applications is very good. But I would like to challenge that. I think to get people on and get this technology rolling, we actually need intermediate applications that are like maybe built up from the ground with a centralized element, and then have decentralized element into it, so that companies and bigger organizations and we all can get used to it a little bit more. If we start with a completely decentralized platform, for example, we can see this with Argo, for example, or other projects. It's still very hard to use. And I personally think only until we get decentralized technology embedded into already existing technology stacks, the technology will improve. If we also are just working on the technology stack and really have this completely decentralized notice in the back of our mind, I think the army that we can create to build decentralized technology will be too small, maybe. What do you use?
I mean, I couldn't agree more personally, because I had a horrible personal experience going full on DAO, and I still have a bad case of PTS DAO because of that. And I'm a little scared of decentralization sometimes, but I really think that if you start out with a path to decentralization, right, built into the foundation of where you're going, then you can implement, security features that allow for centralization, that for the temporary time while you're building something to work, and you want to test it and you want to see how it goes and you want to play around until you can fully trust the code base to be, I don't want to say automated, I want to say autonomous, right?
Yeah, I think for the technical side, a year ago, I would agree with that. Then we have made so much work for having Aragon be a fully decentralized app that I think right now we basically built all this stack that now is easy to use, but a year ago wasn't. And so I think this enables to actually create apps that are fully decentralized from day one. Although I agree with governance, that particular use case, I think you have to start a little bit centralized yet, because we don't have any examples at all of decentralized governance working. So we got to do that. On the other hand, like, the easiest way to do this is to start fully decentralized. Like, in our case, we started centralize our own governance with like a legal entity, and now we're having to transition that to be like a fully centralized entity. And it's a pain in the ass because you have to involve lawyers. You have to make sure that you have something to transition from like stage 0 centralized to stage 1 decentralized. And of course, in our case, we couldn't start a DAO back in the day because they weren't DAOs back in the day, right? We had to first create them. But I think it's way easier if you just launch something that's decentralized from day one. But yeah, we're still not there yet.
I hope that is the case. I will look deeper into Aragon because I looked into it as a year or 2 years ago, and I also had the same feeling like, oh, it's still like a kind of a learning curve to use. So yeah, I'm actually going to Shanghai to work on a project there, which will also start up like centralized, and because it's also like in the Chinese, like things, so it will be very interesting to see. I still need to create a roadmap, so let's see where that goes. But I will definitely look into Aragon then. But as far as I see now around me, apart from Aragon, which I'm not really an expert in, I still see so much difficult like hurdles I need to jump to make something truly decentralized.
Especially for like user interactions, I'm really excited about RadSpec, for instance, because you can't see what you're doing when you're calling a function half the time in a smart contract. I am mostly in the governance mindset where we have real users that are interacting with something, as opposed to, you have decentralized nodes, which are probably sysadmin type guys that are doing this. It's a little bit easier. But if you want to have somebody participate in some kind of decentralized governance system, and they're just supposed to be clicking buttons on MetaMask and it shows 0x blah, 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 and you have no idea what's happening. I mean, how can we can't run decentralized governance if people aren't educated about what they're doing, I don't know. Could you just talk a little bit more about RadSpec and that move and why NatSpec is not so tight? And also, we'll make this panel into 3, and I'm going to sit down, but if someone else wants to come up sometime, we can start doing like 3 and 4.
Cool. Thanks, Griff. Yeah, so the idea with RadSpec is there was something called NatSpec, and NatSpec was a way that you could describe what your smart contract is doing. So, for example, you could have a function called withdraw, and then you could describe to the user, you will withdraw X amount of tokens if you perform this action. And the problem with that, with NatSpec, the original implementation the Ethereum Foundation did, is that it was very insecure. Basically, it would parse anything that you give to it and evaluate it as it was JavaScript. So you could actually use, have some function in your Solidity code which would steal the private keys from the user or something like that. So we kind of forked. We actually built something else from scratch called RadSpec. And RadSpec is exactly like NatSpec, like you describe what your Solidity functions do in your smart contract, but it's safe. You can only do a handful of different functions, multiplications, divide, sum, stuff like that. And so you can present your user, when your user is trying to do something, instead of a weird data blob in hex, you can tell the user, if you press this button, you are going to send 5 tokens to this person. Or you are going to open a voting, and this voting needs to be approved by 10% of the DAO, stuff like that. So you can really describe what's going on. Of course, there's a problem there, which is I, as a developer, can put whatever I want in my smart contract. The smart contract can be burning funds, and I can say it's creating tokens, right? I can describe something that is not true. But then what you can do is you can create these registries. You can put all of these RadSpec notices in a registry, and then have people, like auditors, for example, go over the code and actually put something in a stake and say, yeah, this code, it's saying what it does. And then we can have the registries who are community or ecosystem wide, and then we can trash those, and users can be this is a verified function. We can put in a green tick next to it, this is this description here is actually what's going to happen if you press this button. And then users don't need to know about weird hex strings anymore, which I think is beautiful for user experience.
This is just something I've been thinking about on trusting the decentralized. Is the DAO happened, and then now it feels like there's a lot of energy to get back to trying this out again. And where are we on the scale of trust? And then what's left for us to do to hit that where everyone's yeah, let's do this again?
Honestly, I think most people have forgotten about the DAO a lot. And in fact, there's so much new blood in this space that so many people probably weren't even around for the DAO. So that in some ways is a little scary, because also a lot of new devs that have I can't remember the specifics, but there was a reentrancy hack not too long ago, like a month ago, like that after the DAO, no one would have a reentrancy hack, but now already you can tell people are starting to have some issues. So I think people are ready for it, and I'm surprised. In fact, lots of people have been hitting me up saying, hey, we need DAO 2.0. Like, when are we going to do this? Let's just make it happen. Who gives a fuck, right? And so I think we're ready for it. We'll see who has the balls to actually make it happen.
I hope it's like an anonymous kind of, because that's the thing about DAOs, right? You can set up a DAO in a way that no one has to trust you for sending you money. And so I think that would be amazing if just someone anonymous raises like $2 billion for a crazy DAO. And well, let's hope it doesn't get hacked. But
I mean, I like the idea of small experiments. And I mean, that's the whole point of Giveth, honestly. Like, that's what we're really working towards. And that's why we've collaborated with Aragon, and we're building the Aragon DAC and a second dev team so that we can start experimenting with DAOs in the real world, but in a way that it's not, it really can't fail so badly. As in, like, if you build a DAO for charity and the DAO gets hacked and it was supposed to help a bunch of people, homeless people in Barcelona, okay, it sucks. I wish that money would have helped homeless people in Barcelona, but it didn't make the world a worse place, right? If it failed. So you have the opportunity to beta test a DAO governance system and make the world a better place, use real money, actually play with the system where there is something at stake, which is the optimistic hope that you're going to affect the world and make it better. But if it all goes to shit, it's okay. There's nothing to lose.
Yeah, I also think we need to start building, and we need to start, building DAOs and the infrastructure for that. I hear that sounds very good. And this actually based on an open question. Do you also already look at off-chain smart contracts, for example, or do you think everything on-chain is the best way to go?
Yeah, well, I think stuff like the counterfactual, in which you can create a bunch of contracts and then use these state channels for not only payments but for a bunch of other things. Basically, any contract. I think that's a dream. And if you combine that with sidechains, like, you can really get fancy with it. I think we are arriving at a point in which, like, in the next 6 months to a year, we will start having that technology available. And that's going to make everything so cheap. Because when I think about DAOs, the bottleneck right now is voting. Voting is very expensive. And if it's expensive, no one is going to do it. Even if it's like 5 cents, we need to make it cheaper. And I think stuff like that will really boost participation by a lot once we have those technologies.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of sidechains. I think that's a great way to go. Earlier, we saw the open source blockchain explorer guys out here, and POA network and all the other Ethereum forks. They're so cheap to do things on. They're basically free. In fact, for Giveth, we have a sidechain to Rinkeby where it is actually free. Right? It's 100% free to do all the fun stuff that you want to do. Yeah, it's a testnet, and so it's all free. But we're using real Ether, right? So we actually create a token on Rinkeby, move that token around, and are playing with the stuff and doing governance decisions and delegating and using our very complicated smart contracts with Rinkeby gas. So it's 100% free. And then when the payouts happen, we take the bridge and we actually send real Ether. Of course, this is a centralized solution. Rinkeby is a centralized chain. There's only like 4 or 5 people that run it. You have to trust our server that is making the bridge. But you start with this. You start centralized with a path to decentralization. So we are working with POA Network and Parity, who Parity I think is just about to release the arbitrary message passing bridge, which is really exciting. Really, really good. And so once we have that in place, we can just start swapping things out. Move from Rinkeby to a better chain, right? That is more decentralized. Get rid of our arbitrary, we call it the ghetto bridge because it's super ghetto. And we can get rid of that and switch it up for the parity bridge. And we can just start interchanging the centralized pieces out and plug in decentralization where we need it. You know.
Just the starting from centralized and then having a path to decentralized. Like I have my project, and I'm wondering what is the path? Because we're starting out, and I want the end to be a DAO. Like, what is the path that you set out to make that happen, to do that correctly?
Well, I think first of all you have to commit to your community. I think just like putting a commitment, like a strong commitment to your community, creates a lot of pressure for you to actually do what you say. I think that's very important. And then second, I think you have to structure your whole project in a way that it looks like it's decentralized. It may not be decentralized at day one, but if someone looks at it, they have to think it is. One example, like right now in Aragon, we have a bunch of things that are in fact centralized because we are not there yet. For example, our legal entity is controlled by a board that is very centralized. But then we are setting up this system in which we have multiple teams. So no single team has control of the whole project. We are not there yet in let's say formally, but we are there yet in paper, because in paper, that's how it works. And we have the commitment to the community. That's how, we will move towards that path. So I think getting past the sense of like third-party contributors and first-party contributors, and just like everyone is a contributor, and you can have multiple teams, and you can have multiple people coming in and out. I think that's a great first step, because otherwise you end up having like a centralized legal entity that employs people and grows to like 100, 200 people, whatever. And then in paper it is decentralized because it's open source and all of that. But in practice, you have like a team led by 1-2 people that are basically leading development. And if that team shuts down, you're done.
Yeah, I mean, in all practicality, you just can't start. It's almost impossible to start out decentralized. And Aragon did a great job during their token sale saying, listen, by the end of this thing, it's going to be controlled by a DAO, the whole thing. And, you make that promise to the community up front and you say, this is the plan. You have the little white paper or whatever, right? And you say, this is the plan. We're going to do it. We're going to make steps. And if you can, have some kind of projected roadmap or something to give them, and you have integrity and you maintain pushing towards that, even if you can't make the time, like the steps, it's probably always just best to leave out time, in the roadmap and just be like, we're going to get there, right? But I mean, I got to plug your project a little bit, Tenegraph, because it's a fantastic project, and you guys have taken the next steps to start out really decentralized. You don't have a legal entity, which is always helpful. You're running on Giveth, and you can have bounties and contributors. It sounds to me like the plan is, for the most part, to just be like kind of stewarding the system and try to find other people to build signaling platforms to display on the platform. So Tenegraph is like Coin.dance for Ethereum. Coin.dance is a signaling platform where Bitcoiners can go and see what the state of the network is, especially around contentious issues. So like when the Bitcoin Cash was being forked, like how many people were supporting it, during SegWit 2X, how many people are actually being a piece of this, right? Like AFRI just sits down and right now, there's this huge debate between should we push back the hard fork, right? And then all of a sudden, Reddit and Twitter explode. No, we can't push it back. What's wrong with you guys? Blah, blah, blah. It's like all this noise. Who are these people? What do the real stakeholders in Ethereum think, right? I doubt they think all that shit that people are on Reddit are saying. What if we could actually find a way to actually see what different stakeholders think about the hard fork? What do the miners think? They probably hate it because we're reducing the block reward, right? And what do the influencers think, right? What does the exchanges and full nodes, like the important full nodes, what do they think? Or what do the developers think? And you can do coin votes. You can have you can record people on Twitter what they say, or Medium posts what they say. And it's really important for a project like this not to be owned by a central authority and be influenced by this like power that be that no one really knows and no one can contribute to. Right now, like Coin.dance, we've tried to reach out to them, like, hey, do you guys want to like collaborate on a solution for Ethereum? No, they don't, because they're Bitcoin maximalists, and that's not really their shtick, right? And who knows really what's who's running it, and what their story is and what they support. I don't think they're Bitcoin Cash guys, you know? So we don't want to do that in Ethereum. If there's an interesting fork, it would be nice if Tenograph is supported. It's open source. They could just fork Tenograph and use it on the other. Maybe Ethereum Classic could use Tenograph and support it, because that's the ethos that we want to have in a decentralized space. So radical inclusion, radical participation. So I think that you guys are already on the path. And of course, I'm a little biased because I'm helping with this project. And as long as you stay, if you want to move to a decentralized space, you just say that at the beginning and make actions toward it.
So I guess we're saying it then. And just reflection, none of that would have been possible without Giveth, having the platform to be able to start it. And then Aragon, through a Nest grant, has made it so we can really start out and do this. And so I that's just something I'm really grateful for and excited for where this is all going.
Yeah, congrats on the grant. It happened like last week or something, right? Yeah, congrats.
Yeah, and I think it's very important. I was really triggered what I heard about the debates in Ethereum, because I was quite active actually in the debate with the Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash, and I actually personally really hate it. I would like to focus on technology and building things, and I see that in Ethereum. I saw that in Ethereum. I still see that in Ethereum. But I also see a lot of these fighting also starting now in Ethereum. Now the blocks are getting full, and there's people that think that they know something about it, but they don't have any computer science background, and they start shouting about, things that they don't know anything about, and they form like groups of people behind them, and then there's a lot of politics. So I think, that's something we should watch out for, and all should just work together and try to build cool things. So let's move forward.
Anyone else have questions?
I can always keep conversation going. And just so you guys know, anyone can come up and sit here and start talking about radical decentralization in any way, especially you, Afri. But yeah, what are the other topics of radical decentralization that you think really need to be pushed?
I think I just want to talk about the stuff that we are kind of fucking up in the community right now. So another one is in general the kind of shift that has been happening towards KYC on the blockchain. I don't know where to start really. It's just we were trying to build a fully pseudonymous/anonymous community of people in which your race, gender, age, nationality didn't matter. And now, all of a sudden, we are KYCing the hell out of every single person interacting with a blockchain. What is wrong with us as a community? I think that should be seen as something that you just cannot do inside the community. And there are ways to work around it. You can do a fully decentralized token sale today without the need of going, towards all the KYC bullshit. And that's why we are doing crypto in the first place, right? So I think that's a very important topic, just knowing where do we stand and thinking back, 2008, 2009, when everything happened and everything got started, what was the ethos? And are we still having that same ethos that we all signed up for or not?
I just have to complain a little bit on that because I refuse to KYC myself. And sometimes I also live completely off crypto. And I know that when you sell Bitcoin for cash, these guys are probably going to put it on some dark market or some shit. So I mix my coins before I sell it on local Bitcoins or sell them anywhere. And I actually have a bunch of Dash locked up in Changely because I was always using Shapeshift, but now they have user accounts. And so, I don't really want to connect to a user account. And so now I'm using Changely. And then Changely, all of a sudden, even though they have user accounts, at least I don't have to give them a real email and verify with 2FA and all this stuff that Shapeshift makes you do. And then I sent some Dash, and they just, without ever warning me, they actually have my money right now, and they're requiring me to get it back. I have to give them my passport. And I have to show them, not only that, I have to show them where I got the money from. And it has to be a legit exchange or something that I have KYC'd already. I mean, That's insane. They didn't warn me that that could even be a thing. It just popped up, right? And luckily there's a flip.me, I think is what it is, which is now what I'm using. But it's there has been a huge shift to and I have to think that this is direct pushback from government agencies for these large companies that are making a lot of money. But this is the benefit of decentralization. If you keep it small, you don't have to actually follow this shit, right? Like the only reason that Changelly or I don't know Shapeshift's story, but the only reason I can imagine that Changelly would do this is because they are getting pushback and they're making so much money they need to start making compromises.
Yeah, thanks for raising this. I totally agree with both of you. And what we are seeing here is that not only the community around cryptocurrencies and blockchain technology is growing at an insane speed, but also the industry, the companies, corporations, business models, whatever, leveraging blockchain technology. And we have like they see the opportunity, like Shapeshift or all the other exchanges. They can make a lot of money, and like look at the craze that's going on with Binance, like such an insane growth rate. It would be nice if we could. So it's like in this situation difficult both on the community side and on the industry side to preserve the initial values, like this decentralization, this crypto anarchy, this cypherpunk movement that initialized all this. It's really hard to preserve in a community that's growing so fast. How do you preserve this value in this community? And big shout out to GiveEase for actually being only on-chain. I totally appreciate that, and I would encourage other companies or organizations to be like this, to be totally like hard to grab in the legal framework we have, and just exist on-chain. And I'm also planning projects, and I'm trying to go this way. Just be a DAO or even a multisig is like a small DAO on-chain, and like doing this. But I also see that I don't think all these companies want to do KYC. So there's like this issue if they have like a good big revenue, they have to report it somewhere. You know, it's like they probably have to pay bills that to other companies that are not having the ability to accept crypto. So they, I don't know, like let it be servers or electricity. How do we sort that, you know? And that's the point when they have like US dollars on their bank account. How do they report it to the officials, you know? But yeah, in a ideal decentralized future, they could just pay their bill in crypto. That would be nice, but
yeah. I mean, for Giveth, we just rely on the people, right? It's a decentralized entity, so you have a bunch of people that are working there. And when somebody, we have a hacker pad in Barcelona that people are totally. If you're in the crypto space, reach out to me, and you want to crash right next to Sagrada Familia. It's a sweet spot, right? And but we got to pay the bills, so we have a deal with somebody who actually has the place. They have the lease, and we send them crypto, and they pay the rent. You know, and that's kind of the model that we follow. And I think that there is friction in it, and there are some there's a lot of incentive to start a legal entity. For instance, if you want a grant from the Ethereum Foundation, good luck doing it as a blockchain-based entity. They're a Swiss foundation, and they can't just be sending money all willy-nilly to some smart contract. It's not going to work. So, like for instance, DAppNode had to get a legal entity. It sucked. They didn't have one. It was great. We were having fun. But then if they want to get a huge grant from the Ethereum Foundation, they got to do it. But if you got to do it in Switzerland, you know? I was in Switzerland not too long ago, and I went to an ATM, no KYC, $5,000 right out of that baby. It's like, I don't need this many Swiss francs, but you know what? Fuck it. I'm in, you know? Thank you, Biddy. Like, you guys are great. And if you find these legal jurisdictions that are friendly and are cool, then that's where you want to hang out. And I think there is this little bit of fear and compromising when you go and you want to go and talk to someone who you think has the answers, a lawyer or an accountant. And they're just going to tell you what they need to tell you so that you can incorporate in their jurisdiction. It's like, oh yeah, no, this is easy. Yeah, let's do it over here or where I'm from in the States. Yeah, okay, we can only work with accredited investors here. It's cool. But in the end, that's not really the answer. And none of these guys, accountants or lawyers, there are very few that have a really good, well-founded opinion on how to solve the problems you want to solve. You're almost better off just making guesses and, having some kind of, I would say, a fund in the back that's like, just in case we get fucked, this is, instead of paying the lawyer, like, have a savings. And, if you do your best, I really think that people will be and have historically been lenient. Like, if we look around, the only people who get screwed in the crypto space are total scammers. A lot of scammers don't, and nobody good has. I haven't seen, you could say, oh, what about Charlie Shrimp? Dude, the guy was selling crypto to drug dealers, like, openly. He got caught. Like, there are people who have been screwed, but for the most part, they're doing something a little bit too risky. If you're really just trying to make the world a better place, like Giveth, dude, that would be hilarious if someone attacked Giveth, like a legal entity attacked Giveth. Or nonprofits. We're trying to help charity. Why would they do that? Dapnode? No one's going to attack Dapnode. They're just building some hardware. What?
Yeah, completely agree. And that's the point in which we need to be fully decentralized. So if they come after us, we're like, you just call to that 0x123 address and try to extort that address, because I have nothing to do with that. Although, I agree, like, we can see cases maybe like 10 years from now or 5 years from now in which we have like kidnapping cases and like extortion and like real stuff going on. So we really want to decentralize before that happens. It's kind of a time bomb.
Yeah, eventually there will be problems. But, the people who have balls and take some risks, I think they'll be rewarded greatly. And they'll be loved by the community, and they will be making a change in this world, as opposed to just making some money, and working on some cool project that you want to see. Like, let's actually start pushing the envelope and bring decentralization. And it's not going to happen without some experimentation, What's another thing that we're screwing up?
Well, I think I want to follow up on the whole thing about governments and jurisdictions. So I think right now we are seeing this push from like governments to actually like take back our ideals with like KYC and all of this. I think it should be the other way around. We should be actually empowering jurisdictions to compete against each other, as you were saying. So, don't just trust someone that tells you to create a legal entity where you live. There are beautiful jurisdictions out there that are friendly, that are pushing for these people in governments who know what crypto is. Like, I live in Zug in Switzerland, which is known as the Crypto Valley. And it is not exactly a place where you have a lot of builders. You have a lot of like people with suits. But that being said, these people get it. Like, these people know about crypto. People from the government come and like greet you, and they are like, hey, we are like crypto friendly, and not only low taxes, but everything else too. Like, they know about crypto. You can hire accountants and lawyers who know how to report crypto. Stuff like that is amazing. You don't have to, like, there are stuff like no capital gains for individuals, like a lot of things that make your life as a crypto or like sovereign individual way better. And it's not that hard to shop for these jurisdictions. Like, you can find a lot of info online. Actually, in the case of Zug, even in their webpage, they say, we don't treat our taxpayers as like debtors. We treat them as customers. And I think more and more jurisdictions will do that if we give them the chance to do so. So we should reward jurisdictions that do that and get away from the ones that are like, trying to tax and micromanage and control every single transaction.
Yeah, and because we were experimenting with this, being a non-legal entity, we've had to come up with creative solutions for people that are in jurisdictions that are a little overbearing. And there's a company called, maybe I'll be discreet about the details, but basically for people who are in Europe, they often need a tax ID. They can't just receive money from a smart contract and then pay taxes. It's never going to work. So what we do is that we have a friend with a Swiss entity that will actually contract that person to work for a smart contract, because in Switzerland, you can receive money from a non-legal entity. And so this Swiss company can then be the one that's contracted by the smart contract. And the Swiss company then has an agent, which is this person who lives in Spain or wherever, and they can actually pay taxes to their jurisdiction because they have a tax ID, and they can now participate in paying for the roads and all those things that good citizens want to do, right? And the more that we experiment with this, with full decentralization, the more problems we're going to solve. It just takes a lot of people working at. And hopefully, if you guys ever actually want to do this, we are both working and pushing Aragon forward. Luis much more than me, but but the Aragon DAC is really excited about holding people's hands to try out being a non-legal entity and building using the Aragon platform to create a DAO or a governance system for you. So please reach out if you guys want to experiment. We have lots of tricks up our sleeves, like that Swiss entity, that we can share with you to make life easier. And if we work together, we'll find more solutions for more problems that come up.
And also there is a grant for creating a marketplace of proxies, as we call them, which is systems like the one Griff described of you can have a legal entity that does some verification with your DAO and then basically creates invoices or transacts for you in the traditional world. And we want someone to create a marketplace for these entities. So it's as easy as just going to the Aragon interface and being like, I want to pay to this person. I want to use this proxy in Liechtenstein or Switzerland or whatever and get paid to this bank account. So we can interface the two worlds. So there's a grant for generalizing that, which I would love for someone to use work on that to just take all the learnings that you guys have and create a beautiful piece of software that automates most of that. That would be amazing.
So once you start implementing foundations to represent DAOs, either for funneling money or representing a project or content or something like that, how do you prevent decentralization at that level?
So the idea with the proxies is that you don't have a one-to-one relationship. You don't have a one DAO, one legal entity. You have one proxy, and then you have 1,000 DAOs that are using that same proxy. Obviously, you gotta have very good cryptoeconomic incentives in these proxies for them not to fail, because you can send money to a bank account with the promise that this proxy will convert that money and send Ether to your DAO, but then the proxy could just keep the money, right? So these proxies have to have a huge stake into this marketplace that I'm describing. So if some DAOs report that things are not working for them, they would get that deposit as last. I don't think this is going to be a marketplace in which anyone can create a proxy. I think it's going to be high stakes. You have to stake a lot of money for that to happen. Because if you say, for example, you are dealing with $1 million per year in DAO volume, maybe you have to have $1 million in a stake at some given time, or 100K, so you don't fuck up with the DAOs. But otherwise, I think it's a beautiful system to have one proxy and 1,000 DAOs using it. But if a proxy fails because there's something going on, you can always switch to another one in another jurisdiction even.
Yeah, I'm just afraid of what the state can do, try to attack these big foundations that represent multiple DAOs.
Yeah, exactly. That's why you gotta have a lot of them all across the world in different jurisdictions. So you can with a click, it's like load balancing with servers. You are just no, I wanna load balance to Switzerland, now to Liechtenstein, now to Singapore.
What do you think about identity issues? If we want to have real governance solutions, we need one person, one vote. And I'm sure that we can do some makeshift solutions, but what do you, to me, that's kind of along the lines of this KYC thing, is having a proof of uniqueness, or just being able to do governance models with sovereign identity. Can you jive off that?
Yeah, sure. I think for many governance models, you don't need one vote, one person, because sometimes the other way around, X tokens, X votes aligns incentives better. But for some governance models, you clearly need one person, one vote. And I think there are multiple takes to this, and maybe you can also talk about one of them. I think there's a project called Bright ID that also received a Nest grant, and they are working on basically a web of trust model for identity. So you can have people who basically vouch for you, and then you have this reputation, and you can use the reputation inside, your Aragon identity or your Aragon client or whatever to interact with people in the Web3. So I think that's great approach. Then there are other approaches. Maybe you can talk a little bit about like Idem3 as well. I think there are multiple approaches to that. But I mean, I think SQL resistance is kind of a huge problem to solve in a decentralized way, and it's very hard to solve in a decentralized way.
Yeah, I mean, Idem3 is a very young project, so I don't know how deep I want to go on it, but we definitely need an identity solution that will be simple and easy and doesn't have some kind of token or some kind of like extra static. And that's definitely the Idem3 approach. But I would say listen to the DevCon talk if you guys want to follow up on that. But I'm excited about Bright ID and the push because like we don't need, like Idem3 is really trying to do this piece of identity where it's like I am over 18 or I am, living in the States or I am blah, blah, blah. But whereas Bright ID is proof of uniqueness. I'm an individual person. That's all you need to know. Right, and that's really interesting because that brings in the anonymity and the privacy. Idem3 does too, but with all this other functionality. Just something simple that we can have one person, one vote. I think it will be a huge push in the right direction. What else do you think we're doing wrong in the decentralization world?
Well, I think also coming back to like token sales, like I remembered 2017 when like there were a lot of like community token sales, and it was just like community who were participating, and like you had even before that like the Ethereum token sale, it was very criticized by Bitcoin maximalists as being like a pre-mine, and I was like a Bitcoin maximalist myself before, so I can relate to that. But then you saw like the Ethereum Foundation and stuff like that taking like 10% of the supply, then it was like 20, then 30, and then suddenly like people are just selling 3% of their tokens. And well, if you want to move to decentralized governance, and right now the only system you have is, X tokens, X votes, it is very hard to do that if the public, your community, only has like 3% of the tokens. So if you do a token sale, you sell like, just like half of it or more, or like 70% or like something like that. Because otherwise, also your valuation gets to like, I don't know how many $1 billion, which is one of the things that were interesting about Bitcoin and Ethereum is that there were some of the first opportunities for the mainstream to like, basically invest into a technology that would change how we communicate and how we build stuff together. And so that's very powerful. And if you do this wrong and you sell 1% of the tokens for like $100 million, then you're basically taking advantage of the community. And I think a few projects did that in the last couple of years. And that's what we are today. Like regulators crack down, and we can't have all the good stuff anymore because some people were just greedy. So we don't want to be in that position.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like sometimes because we kind of come from, as a community, the minority in society, we often try to have this kind of avant-garde party view on how to make adoption or create systems for people. But so we're building kind of this house of cards of crypto economic primitives and different technical layers that might have no kind of resemblance or comprehension for the end user. And that might be a problem. And I think it also adds on to when you do a token sale, you also have huge advantages for early adopters. And so when you're talking about DAOs that will be massively scalable, you have to have an incentive to give back power beyond just your ideology or goodwill.
Yeah, I'm excited to see some other experiments with ICO models that are more decentralized, more autonomous. There's this idea of DICOs, which I think we talked about yesterday a little bit, and they wanted to change the name to CTOs. That's what I love about these CTOs. I can't even remember what it stood for. Maybe Sfonet was in the discussion, but it was that's the fun thing about these little discussions. We can build ideas off of each other, but this whole like just sending money to a multi-sig and then hey, we'll see how it goes. It seems kind of ridiculous, It's like the DAO became an excuse to not have to do anything cool, And I'm hoping to see some platforms that will allow people to easily hold themselves accountable, and where it's more about the idea and seeing the idea to fruition, as opposed to more about making a bunch of money and being able to do your dream job for a few years and then buy a few houses for all your family members, right? Like it should be about these ideas. And I think if we can bring some more decentralization, it will focus on the ideas, because that would be more incentivized, and building a full concept about how, and roadmap about how do we get this idea to fruition. And that'll be some big benefits of having a model like FCAN is working on. And I think there's other DICO UIs that people are pushing, so that this is easy. Even Aragon effectively could be really pieced into that. Just need the right plugins, and then all of a sudden we can have a DAO where the money goes into these milestones, and once people accomplish those milestones, it's released to the people who do it. Or Colony is very much something like that. So I think that we'll see the ICOs have faded. A lot of people think, but personally, I don't believe it. It's really just that the price of Ether has tanked so much, people don't want to get rid of it yet. I think we'll see a resurgence of ICOs, because that's what people want to do. It's safe and tried and tested. So I'm hoping that we can see some of these other platforms evolve and put people's feet to the fire and show the greater community that there's a better way to raise funds around an idea than just throwing it in a multi-sig and giving the community 30% of the tokens. But we'll see.
Yeah, and I want to say though that a couple of years ago that's what we had basically. We did the same thing, right? We just fundraised a lot of money and then had it on a multi-sig. And that's because we didn't have DAOs. But now that we have stuff like DAOs or more complex smart contracts, I think we can experiment and just get rid of the whole fear of the DAO, as you said.
Yeah, what I would like to add is that, and maybe it's not a problem with the current decentralization, but I think more an opportunity. I think for the most of us, it's very obvious to be in a working mode where you participate in different projects at the same time. So instead of just doing one daytime job and then doing some let's say things in your free time, that you really actively participate, but also get rewarded for working on different projects at the same time. So I think for the most of us, it's it's a common day practice. But I think for most of technical people that actually work in a consultative job and all that, that's not so obvious as we think. And I think there's a big opportunity for pulling in other people, because all these models for flexible funding, these DICO models and all that, they will allow to reward people, to send some value to people for even small contributions, which don't have to represent a daytime job. And so I think that's also an opportunity, something we can do better or focus more on in the future, just because the technology allows us to do that. I think there's a lot of people that actually want to participate in that in that model. I talked to a bunch of people already down in the hall that are not into blockchain yet, but they're just coming here to see and to learn, to get to know some people, and they're really looking at what can I do, how can I make money in this space, and they're sort of looking for a job actually, but it's the wrong approach. They don't have to look for a job. They have to look for opportunities where to participate. That's also why I like these initiatives like Gitcoin, for example, where you can just put bounty on a small task and people can just start to work for that. So that's most of the time my first answer to say, yeah, look at these bounty systems, because you can just get started there. You can get to meet all these people that actually spend their funds using that kind of work. So yeah, I just wanted to add that I think it's an opportunity, not necessarily a problem.
I mean, I think the bonded curve token cell or CTO, whatever we call it, model is quite interesting, because ICOs, didn't have incentives aligned, right? But still in this model, I still don't see kind of giving investors governance. And so the question would be, if you give investors governance onto the project, this might be an issue. For example, when you make a company public, then the shareholder pressure, it really prevents you from doing what you want. So how far should governance go on investment in these things?
I think the bonding curve or cyclic token distribution models are very interesting. But I think we also need to get back to a startup culture and just try to just build something without raising money, build your token model, and build in a mechanism for your foundation, for example, to make money if your product actually works. So then you just build something, and then if it actually works, it will make money. Of course, the leeching, like if somebody just forks it, and that can be dangerous. But I think we should have this startup culture that we all come from. A lot of people come from. We need to get that back and start building without first focusing on gathering money. What do you guys think?
Yeah, so I agree with your statements. Although I think there a lot of the let's say the traditional problems in like doing a traditional startup is also related towards money. I mean, you have to have the opportunity to quit your current job to jump into this adventure. So usually you go to a venture capitalist or whatever, or an incubator or whatever. But I think, like we touched before, these flexible reward models allow people to sort of roll into that more than sort of to have to jump into this cliff to start doing that. So I think there's like more opportunity to do it like that.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I'm also a little bit because we have some fighting within communities, but maybe we should direct our fighting against scams in the communities instead of like fighting with good protocols or like small things. But it's a very hard approach. Like how should we react against people that are not doing it in a correct way? Maybe think that they're doing a good thing, but they're obviously doing something that will lose a lot of money for investors. Like how should we react to that?
Yeah, I think the line between scam and just someone who doesn't know what the fuck they are doing, it's a very thin line. I cannot picture the meme of like the dog behind the keyboard, just like ICO now and just like pressing enter. And I think it's very dangerous. As a community, we should try to support newcomers, but also be like, hey, this doesn't make any sense at all. And I think sometimes we have to be clear what is like constructive feedback versus just offending people. And I think I would love to see more like constructive feedback and just being like, hey, I don't have anything personal against you, but what you are doing doesn't make any sense at all. And I think stuff like that makes a lot of sense. And also like prediction markets can really help that. You can create a prediction market for whether a project is going to fail or not. And I think when we have that, it kind of solves the problem a little bit. You can just go to the prediction market and be like, hey, what I'm doing, these people don't believe in it and they have put money in it. So, they have literally put their money where their mouth is. I think that will help.
So I'm a freelance researcher, and I work I also work for hedge funds. And then I go into Telegram groups and I do code analysis. And then I really try to give constructive feedback into Telegram groups or talk with founders. And this happens 9 out of 10 times. I get blocked or they censor me. And I don't know how we should respond to that or what we should do with that. And did somebody else experience that as well?
Yeah. Like where I'm from in Belgium, we have a saying, I'm not going to say it in Dutch because obviously nobody will understand it, I guess, but which says, so where they say like, ongevraagd advies is moeien. So that to say, if you don't explicitly ask for somebody's opinion or advice, you're imposing it, then you're sort of behaving bad in the sense that it's unwanted criticism or whatever.
Yeah, on that idea, there's like a it'd be really nice if we had, and prediction markets are in a way this decentralized certification agencies that people can trust, right? And you can have competing certifications for, is this a good ICO or not? And there are some of these out there, like ICO rating and other things like that. But yeah, exactly, right? Exactly. There's people trying it. Hey, I'm not saying they're good options. No, I mean, I don't know the guys, and honestly, I've never really looked at the site, but I do like the idea of having certification bodies that you can trust and opting into them, but finding a incentive model where that works, because we need that for all sorts of things. But the only models I've seen are prediction markets, and basically, it's like someone has to put it out there and demand that they want this information. So they put a bounty and say, hey, for 100 Ether, I need to know, is this project going to succeed or not? And then people will actually start gambling on it. But that's not, you can't, that's not a full-on certification agency. And so I can't wait to see some of these tragedy of the common issues solved without having the use of force through governments, because that's how we generally solve them in our communities. But we'll see. That's one of the things that Giveth is trying to push, is to experiment with that. But it takes a lot. Once we start having Aragon out there and integrate it into the Giveth app, then we'll see what we can do. It'll take some time.
Yeah, should I just go on with like stuff we're doing wrong? Okay, nice. Transparency is another huge topic. Like, we're talking about ICOs and just gathering money, but then not being transparent about what you do with your money. I think that's equally bad. And so, we figured out time ago, we have all of these like business expenses that are documented because our accountants need them. So why don't we just post it online? And we forked the like Gnosis multisig. Yeah. So we forked the Gnosis multisig, and we just added like some human readable field to it. It was really easy. Like, it's out there. I think it's called like multisig transparency or something. You can fork it as well. And boom, that's it. Like, you go to transparency.aragon.org and you see how much we're paying everyone. And some people don't even know it, and they are like, contractors or something. But we just post it there because it's morally correct to do so. And it doesn't take any work. Like, you already have all of that for your accountants, right? So why just like not post it? And I would love to see more projects doing that, because it's, when you spend money, you are spending money that your community gave you for something, and the community will love to see what you're doing. Even if you think no one cares, people care. And I think after a year and like a half having this online, or like, a year and a half, I've seen a lot of community members that come and say, I love what you guys are doing because you are transparent. So I think, it doesn't hurt. It just helps.
I think the good projects need better marketing then, because I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's hard when there's a lot of projects and everybody's doing a lot of cool things, but they're all in their own little silos. And here we are curious about what this project is doing. It takes time to do the deep dive. I mean, there's so much going on in this space. So, but I couldn't agree more with transparency. That's a push that Giveth is trying to do, and DAppNode has their salaries on the Giveth Dapp, for instance, but it also takes a little bit of effort, and.
Yeah, well, actually, I want to talk about your transparency in the Giveth app, because it's really cool. Like, you can go and basically see like the description of like each individual piece of work that a contributor did and how much did they get paid. So it's like, for example, I coded this button for like this app, and I'm just having like 1 ETH for this particular feature. So it's even more granular, and I think it's amazing what you guys have there.
Yeah, you can see how much we paid for the Airbnb in Berlin, right? And but even better, you can donate to that, and you can create things bounties basically for the organization to succeed, right? Like for Tenegraph, if you want to see a specific signal, then you put a bounty on it, or you anyone can create a milestone in Tenegraph's Giveth like campaign. And then, once it receives enough funding, you just work with the Tenegraph organization to see how much it needs to be, and then boom, it would actually happen. And that's the kind of decentralized development I hope to see, but we'll see.
Thanks for listening. If you haven't already, please subscribe and give us a rating or comment if you enjoyed this content. This episode was brought to you by Santa and the unicorns at giveth.io. Remember, this podcast is made possible by the donations we receive from listeners like you. If you'd like to help support the podcast, you can do so by donating Ether at dattpodcast.com. That's DATT podcast.com. Please check the show notes for more information. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, keep decentralizing all the things.